In just 37 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved actresses would unleash a verbal assault so devastating that it would leave morning television's golden girl speechless, her carefully crafted persona crumbling in real time, as millions watched the most explosive confrontation in daytime TV history unfold. The tension had been brewing from the moment Helen Mirren stepped into the ITV studios last night. What should have been a straightforward promotional appearance for her latest film quickly spiraled into a career-defining moment that exposed the dark underbelly of morning television and revealed just how far Lorraine Kelly would go to destroy a guest who dared to challenge her authority. "Helen, darling, welcome back to the show." Lorraine cooed with that trademark Scottish lilt, but seasoned viewers could detect something different in her tone, a sharpness that hadn't been there in previous interviews. The camera caught Mirren's subtle eye roll as she settled into the deliberately uncomfortable guest chair, her posture already defensive. "Thank you for having me," Mirren replied coolly, her voice carrying decades of theatrical training and an unmistakable note of wariness. She'd clearly done her homework on Kelly's recent interviews, where the host had been increasingly aggressive with guests who didn't play along with her carefully orchestrated narrative. Lorraine wasted no time diving into controversial territory, her smile never wavering even as her questions grew more pointed. "Now, Helen, there's been quite a lot of chatter online about your recent comments regarding the monarchy. Some people are saying you've become rather vocal about certain members of the royal family. Care to elaborate?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Mirren's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her years of experience handling difficult interviews kicked in. "I think my comments were taken out of context, Lorraine. I've always been respectful in my discussions about the royal family. But that's not entirely true, is it?" Lorraine pressed, leaning forward with predatory intensity. "Our researchers found several instances where you've been quite critical, almost bitter, some might say." The word bitter landed like a slap. Mirren's composure flickered for just a moment, revealing a flash of genuine anger before she regained control. "I wouldn't characterize my comments as bitter, Lorraine. I'd call them honest observations from someone who's had the privilege of portraying these figures." Lorraine's laugh was sharp and calculated. "Oh, privilege? That's an interesting choice of words from someone who's built quite a career off the backs of real people's tragedies and triumphs. Tell me, Helen, do you ever feel like a bit of a vulture picking apart these lives for entertainment?" The studio fell silent, except for the hum of cameras continuing to roll. Even the production crew seemed to hold their breath as they witnessed their usually diplomatic host cross a line that veteran interviewers knew never to cross. Mirren's eyes narrowed, her famous composure beginning to crack under the deliberate provocation. "Excuse me?" Mirren's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, the kind of tone that had silenced entire film sets and commanded respect from Hollywood's most powerful figures. "Did you just compare me to a vulture?" Lorraine's smile widened, sensing blood in the water. "Well, if the shoe fits, darling. You've made millions portraying real people without their consent, profiting from their pain. The Queen, for instance, she couldn't exactly object to your interpretation, could she? Rather convenient timing with that film, wouldn't you say?" The accusation was breathtaking in its audacity and cruelty. Mirren's hands clenched in her lap, her knuckles white against the dark fabric of her dress. The camera zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression as one of Britain's most accomplished actresses struggled to process the unexpected attack from someone she'd considered a colleague. "That is completely out of line," Mirren said, her voice steady but edged with steel. "My portrayal of Her Majesty was done with nothing but respect and extensive research. To suggest otherwise is not just wrong, it's deliberately malicious." But Lorraine was just getting started, her Scottish accent becoming more pronounced as she prepared for the kill. "Oh, malicious. That's rich, coming from someone who's never hesitated to share intimate details about the royal family in interviews. You've dined out on those stories for years, haven't you? Always ready with another behind-the-scenes anecdote when it suits your publicity needs." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Mirren's breathing became visible, her chest rising and falling as she fought to maintain her legendary professionalism in the face of an increasingly unhinged attack. The other guests scheduled for later in the show watched in horror from the green room as Lorraine systematically dismantled one of the industry's most respected figures. I have always conducted myself with dignity and respect, Mirren replied, each word carefully measured. I'm not sure what's prompted this line of questioning, but I think we should focus on why I'm actually here, to discuss my new project. Lorraine's eyes gleamed with something that looked suspiciously like satisfaction. She'd drawn first blood, and now she was ready to twist the knife. Oh, but Helen, your dignity and respect are exactly what I'm questioning. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've built an entire career on exploiting real people's stories for your own gain. And now that you're getting older, you're getting desperate, aren't you? Clinging to relevance by making increasingly controversial statements about the very people who made you famous. The words hit their target with surgical precision. Mirren's face flushed, and for the first time in decades of public appearances, she looked genuinely shaken. The deliberate cruelty of the attack was becoming clear. This wasn't about journalism or even entertainment. This was personal destruction, broadcast live to millions of viewers who had tuned in expecting light morning chat about upcoming films and charity work. Getting desperate? Mirren repeated, her voice barely controlled fury. I've been working in this industry for over 50 years, Lorraine. I think my body of work speaks for itself. Does it, though? Lorraine shot back without missing a beat. Because lately, all I see is someone trying to stay relevant by stirring up controversy. The royal comments, the political statements, the increasingly desperate attempts to shock audiences. It all feels rather pathetic, doesn't it? The word pathetic hung in the air like poison gas, and everyone in the studio knew they had just witnessed something unprecedented. Lorraine Kelly, the woman who had built her career on warm, supportive interviews with celebrities promoting their latest projects, had just systematically attempted to humiliate one of Britain's most celebrated actresses on live television. The studio floor manager frantically gestured to the director's booth, but the cameras kept rolling. This was television gold, even if it meant sacrificing any pretense of professional journalism. Mirren sat frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 seconds, her training as an actress warring with her instincts as a human being who had just been publicly eviscerated. When she finally spoke, her voice was ice-cold precision wrapped around molten fury. I think there's been some mistake, Lorraine. I came here as a courtesy, to discuss my work. I didn't realize I was walking into an ambush designed to satisfy your apparent need to tear down someone who's never done anything but treat you with respect. Lorraine's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath the carefully constructed persona. Oh, respect? Is that what you call it when you refuse to answer direct questions about your controversial statements? When you sit there acting like you're above accountability? Accountability? Mirren's voice rose slightly, the first crack in her composure becoming audible to the millions watching at home. What exactly am I supposed to be accountable for? Having opinions? Speaking truthfully about my experiences? Or is this really about something else entirely? The question hit its mark. Lorraine's eyes flashed with something dangerous, and suddenly the pretense of journalism evaporated completely. You know what, Helen? Yes, it is about something else. It's about the fact that you've spent decades looking down your nose at people like me, working-class presenters who had to fight for everything we got, while you glided through life on talent and privilege. The admission was breathtaking in its honesty and devastating in its implications. This wasn't about Helen Mirren's recent comments or her film career. This was about class resentment, professional jealousy, and years of buried animosity finally erupting on live television. Mirren's eyebrows shot up, genuine surprise replacing anger for a moment. Are you seriously suggesting that I've somehow wronged you personally? That my success is undeserved because of where I come from? Not undeserved, Lorraine said, leaning back in her chair with the confidence of someone who had finally revealed their true intentions. Just easy. You had doors opened for you that the rest of us had to kick down, and yet you act like you've earned every single thing through pure merit. The accusation was so wildly off base that several members of the production crew exchanged incredulous glances. Helen Mirren, who had worked her way up through repertory theater and struggled for decades before achieving international recognition, was being accused of having an easy path to success. Easy? Mirren's laugh was bitter and sharp. Lorraine, I spent 20 years in provincial theater making barely enough to survive. I was rejected for countless roles, told I wasn't pretty enough, wasn't young enough, wasn't commercial enough. There was absolutely nothing easy about building my career. But Lorraine was beyond reason now, drunk on the power of finally saying what she'd apparently been thinking for years. "Oh, please, spare me the sob story. You went to university. You had connections. You spoke with the right accent. Some of us had to claw our way up from nothing with no safety net." The bitterness in Lorraine's voice was palpable, and it was becoming clear that this attack had very little to do with Helen Mirren herself, and everything to do with Lorraine's own insecurities and resentments. But that didn't make it any less devastating to witness. Mirren's training finally kicked in, and she drew herself up to her full height even while seated. "I'm not going to sit here and be lectured about privilege by someone who spent the last 10 minutes trying to humiliate me on national television for no apparent reason other than some misguided sense of class warfare." "Misguided?" Lorraine's voice rose to a near shout. "You think it's misguided to call out the hypocrisy of someone who preaches about authenticity while living in an ivory tower? You've been playing characters your entire life, Helen. I'm not sure you even know who you really are anymore." The personal nature of the attack had escalated beyond anything viewers had ever witnessed on morning television. This wasn't journalism or even entertainment night. This was psychological warfare being broadcast to families eating breakfast across Britain. Mirren's hands were visibly shaking now. Whether from anger or shock, it was impossible to tell. "You don't know the first thing about who I am or what my life has been like. And frankly, your attempt to psychoanalyze me on live television says far more about your own character than it does about mine." "My character?" Lorraine laughed, but there was no humor in it. "At least I don't hide behind a facade of respectability while cashing in on other people's pain. At least I'm honest about who I am and what I do." The hypocrisy was staggering. Lorraine Kelly, who had built her entire career on manufactured warmth and scripted spontaneity, was accusing Helen Mirren of being fake. The irony wasn't lost on anyone watching, least of all Mirren herself. "Honest?" Mirren repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "You call this vicious, unprovoked attack honest? You call ambushing a guest who came here in good faith honest? I think we have very different definitions of that word." Lorraine's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Sometimes honesty is uncomfortable, Helen. Sometimes it requires saying things that people don't want to hear. Like the fact that your whole career has been built on pretending to be other people because the real Helen Mirren isn't interesting enough." The cruelty of the statement took everyone's breath away, even the hardened television crew, who had seen their share of on-air meltdowns and confrontations, seemed stunned by the deliberate malice of the attack. This had crossed every line of professional behavior and basic human decency. For a moment, Helen Mirren sat in complete silence, her face cycling through a range of emotions: hurt, disbelief, and finally, a cold, calculated fury that would have made Lady Macbeth proud. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the full weight of 5 decades in the entertainment industry and the unmistakable authority of someone who had commanded respect from directors, producers, and royalty alike. "You know what, Lorraine?" Mirren said, her voice so quiet that everyone in the studio had to strain to hear her. "I came here today, prepared to be professional, even gracious. I've sat through your pathetic attempts at provocation, your transparent jealousy, and your frankly embarrassing display of insecurity masquerading as journalism." Lorraine opened her mouth to interrupt, but Mirren held up a hand with such commanding presence that the host actually fell silent. "But now I see what this really is," Mirren continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "This isn't about accountability or honesty. This is about you trying to tear down someone you perceive as having what you think you deserve. And the saddest part, Lorraine, is that you've just destroyed your own reputation in the process." The color began to drain from Lorraine's face as she realized that the tables had suddenly, irrevocably turned. The predator had become the prey, and Helen Mirren was about to demonstrate exactly why she was considered one of the finest actresses of her generation. "You want to talk about authenticity?" Mirren's voice rose, carrying across the studio with theatrical precision. "Let's talk about someone who's built an entire career on false warmth and manufactured sincerity. Someone who smiles while stabbing guests in the back, who pretends to care while calculatingly destroying people for ratings." Lorraine tried to regain control, her voice shaky. Helen, I think you're being a bit dramatic. Dramatic? Mirren's laugh was sharp and dangerous. Oh, darling, you haven't seen dramatic yet. You want to know what's dramatic? It's watching someone so consumed by their own bitterness and inadequacy that they're willing to humiliate themselves on national television just to try to bring someone else down to their level. The studio was dead silent, except for the hum of cameras still rolling. Every person present knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years, dissected frame by frame and replayed endlessly across social media and news programs. Mirren stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. You accused me of not knowing who I really am? Well, let me tell you exactly who I am. I'm someone who has worked tirelessly for over 50 years, who has earned every single role, every award, every accolade through talent, persistence, and yes, sometimes luck. But most importantly, I'm someone who has never ever used my platform to deliberately hurt another human being for sport. Lorraine's carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. Her hands were shaking, and her voice cracked as she tried to respond. I was just asking legitimate questions. Bullshit, Mirren said, the profanity landing like a thunderclap in the morning television landscape. You ambushed me with personal attacks designed to humiliate and degrade. You've shown your viewers exactly what kind of person you really are. And it's not pretty, Lorraine. It's petty, cruel, and deeply unprofessional. The director was frantically signaling for a commercial break, but nobody seemed to be paying attention. This was too compelling, too raw, too utterly unprecedented to interrupt. Mirren picked up her handbag and turned to face the cameras directly, addressing the millions of viewers with the confidence of someone who had commanded attention from the stages of the National Theater to the screens of Hollywood. To everyone watching at home, she said, her voice steady and clear, I want you to remember what you've just witnessed. This is what happens when jealousy and resentment poison someone's soul. This is what happens when a person in a position of trust abuses that trust for their own twisted satisfaction. She turned back to Lorraine, who was now visibly crying, her makeup running in dark streaks down her cheeks. And as for you, Lorraine, I genuinely pity you. To be so consumed by bitterness that you would destroy your own career just to try to hurt someone else. That's not journalism. That's not entertainment. That's just sad. Lorraine made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Helen, please. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Oh, there's been no misunderstanding, Mirren replied coldly. You've shown everyone exactly who you are. And now I'm showing everyone exactly what I think of people like you. She walked toward the studio exit, her heels clicking authoritatively against the floor. At the door, she paused and turned back one final time, her voice carrying across the studio with devastating finality. You know what the difference is between you and me, Lorraine? When I play a character, everyone knows it's an act. You've been playing the role of a decent human being for so long that you've forgotten it was supposed to be performance. With that, Helen Mirren walked out of the studio, leaving behind a destroyed host, a traumatized crew, and millions of viewers who had just witnessed the most spectacular on-air destruction in television history. Lorraine sat alone on her set, mascara streaking her face, her career in ruins, as the cameras finally cut to a hastily arranged commercial break. The aftermath would dominate headlines for weeks. Lorraine Kelly's show was suspended pending investigation, and she would never recover from the public humiliation she had brought upon herself. Helen Mirren, meanwhile, became something of a folk hero overnight, praised for her dignity under attack and her refusal to be intimidated by a bully with a platform. In trying to destroy Helen Mirren, Lorraine Kelly had instead destroyed herself, providing a masterclass in how quickly a reputation built over decades could be demolished in a single, catastrophic moment of poor judgment and petty vindictiveness.